Welcome to this week's Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up, where we bring you expert analysis on the intelligence and national security stories shaping our world. With over 25 years of experience in intelligence and law enforcement, Neil Bisson, director of the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network and a retired intelligence officer with the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, breaks down the critical developments you need to know. This week, U.S. intelligence agencies are shifting their focus away from preventing large-scale terrorist attacks like 9/11s, reallocating resources to counter threats from China, Russia, and cyber warfare. Is this a necessary evolution, or could it leave the U.S. vulnerable? Meanwhile, tensions rise between the U.S. and the U.K. over a controversial demand for access to encrypted Apple Cloud data, sparking a debate on privacy, security, and international intelligence sharing. We're also tracking Russia's covert sabotage operations in Europe, the detention of a British couple in Iran on espionage charges, and the CIA's increasing use of drone surveillance to monitor Mexican drug cartels. And in Australia, ASIO has uncovered foreign plots targeting individuals on Australian soil, raising serious questions about global espionage and interference. Stay tuned as Neil unpacks these urgent developments. Now, let's get started.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. I'm your host, Neil Bisson, the Director of Global Intelligence Knowledge Network. There's been some major stories in the world of intelligence this week, including terrorist listings of Mexican drug cartels and the arrest and detention of a British couple in Iran for espionage. So without further delay, let's get into it. For this week's first story, we start in the United States, where we're looking at a major shift in U.S. intelligence priorities, as agencies scale back efforts to prevent another 9/11-style terrorist attack. Instead, their focus is shifting towards countering threats from China, Russia, and cyber warfare. A recent Global News article highlights how U.S. intelligence agencies are reallocating resources, moving away from counterterrorism and focusing more on geopolitical threats like Chinese espionage, Russian cyber operations, and emerging AI-driven intelligence challenges. This shift raises an important question. Does this realignment leave the U.S. vulnerable to another large-scale terrorist attack? From an intelligence standpoint, the concern is clear. While terrorism has evolved, groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda are still active, and lone actor attacks remain a persistent threat. With fewer resources dedicated to counterterrorism, there's a risk of blind spots developing, something that history has shown can have catastrophic consequences. This isn't the first time intelligence priorities have shifted. After 9/11, the U.S. built a massive counterterrorism infrastructure. Now, with threats from state actors dominating global security concerns, agencies are pivoting. A similar transition happened during the Cold War, when counterterrorism was deprioritized, only for 9/11 to expose dangerous gaps. The key challenge is now ensuring intelligence agencies don't repeat past mistakes. Balancing strategic threats with the unpredictable nature of terrorism is not an easy task. The article includes insights from Dan Stanton, a former CSIS executive officer, who cautions against shifting focus too far from counterterrorism. Stanton warns that terrorist groups haven't disappeared, and that reducing counterterrorism efforts could create opportunities for adversaries to exploit weaknesses in Western intelligence. He emphasizes that intelligence isn't just about reacting to current threats, it's about anticipating the next move. If agencies shift too many resources away from counterterrorism, they might not notice the warning signs until it's too late. From my perspective, Dan Stanton's concerns are well-founded. While geopolitical threats demand attention, terrorism is an adaptive challenge. History has shown that while intelligence agencies take their eye off the ball, bad actors find ways to exploit those gaps. The key is maintaining a layered, flexible approach, one that doesn't neglect any major threat vectors. The U.S. intelligence community is shifting resources from counterterrorism to focus on China, Russia, and cyber warfare. While this reflects evolving threats, history has shown that deprioritizing counterterrorism too much can have serious consequences. The challenge will be striking the right balance, ensuring intelligence efforts remain proactive, not reactive. In our next story, we're discussing rising tensions between the United States and the UK over demand for the British government to access encrypted Apple Cloud data. Two U.S. lawmakers have called this request dangerous and short-sighted, arguing that it threatens American cybersecurity and could undermine global data protection. We'll break down what this means for intelligence, privacy, and the future of secure communications. According to a recent BBC report, Senator Ron Wyden and Congressman Andy Biggs have condemned the UK's request for access to encrypted Apple data, framing it as a major security risk for Americans. The lawmakers have urged U.S. Intelligence Chief Tulsi Gabbard to push back against the UK's demand, even suggesting that failure to do so could result in reevaluating U.S. UK cybersecurity cooperation and intelligence sharing agreements. This demand from the UK stems from an Investigatory Powers Act, which allows British authorities to compel tech companies to provide information to law enforcement. However, Apple's advanced data protection feature relies on end-to-end encryption, meaning not even Apple itself can access the stored data. The UK's government request challenges this encryption model and raises concerns about potential backdoors that could be exploited by adversaries. From an intelligence standpoint, this situation presents a clear dilemma: the need for lawful access to critical data in national security investigations versus the risk of weakening global cybersecurity by introducing vulnerabilities into widely used technology. The debate over encryption is not new. Governments worldwide have clashed with tech giants over access to encrypted data, often citing national security concerns. In 2016, Apple resisted a court order to help the FBI unlock an iPhone belonging to a gunman, arguing that complying would set a dangerous precedent. The UK, like other nations, argues that encryption should not prevent authorities from investigating serious crimes such as terrorism or child exploitation. However, critics, including US lawmakers and privacy advocates, warn that any backdoor access could be exploited not just by Western governments, but also by hostile foreign actors like China and Russia. The key issue here is that Apple does not develop country-specific versions of encryption software. If a vulnerability is introduced for the UK law enforcement, it could also compromise the security of American users, as well as countless government agencies that rely on Apple devices for secure communications. Privacy and cybersecurity experts have expressed alarm over the UK's demand. Privacy International has called it an unprecedented attack on individual data security, and Apple itself has previously stated that it would rather remove encryption services from the UK market than to comply with such demands. Senator Wyden and Congressman Biggs argue that forcing Apple to create a backdoor would effectively make every Apple, iPhone, iPad, and Mac vulnerable to hacking and espionage. They stress this move could have significant repercussions not just for American citizens, but for the international intelligence community itself. Meanwhile, the UK government insists it is not seeking mass surveillance powers, but rather a targeted approach where law enforcement could request access under specific legal conditions. However, given that the Investigative Powers Act applies worldwide, even to companies based outside the UK, Apple and other tech firms face a difficult choice: comply and risk global security, or refuse and face potential legal consequences. The UK's demand for encrypted data has sparked a major debate over privacy, security, and international intelligence cooperation. While law enforcement argues that such access is necessary to combat crime and terrorism, cybersecurity experts warn that any backdoor could be exploited by bad actors, putting millions of users at risk. The outcome of this dispute could have lasting implications for encryption policies worldwide. So, the following questions remain. Will Apple hold its ground, or will political pressure force a compromise? And if the US takes action against the UK over this issue, could it strain intelligence sharing agreements between two of the closest allies in the world? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. In our next story, we're exploring the escalating shadow war in Europe, focusing on recent sabotage incidents in the Baltic Sea and their broader implications. Our discussion is based on a recent article from the ABC News titled "Sabotage, Shadow War in Europe, Australia, and the Baltic Sea." The article sheds light on a series of clandestine operations targeting critical infrastructure in the Baltic Sea. Notably, there have been multiple incidences of undersea cables and pipelines being damaged, with at least 11 cables affected in the past 15 months. These attacks have raised alarms about the security of essential communications and energy networks in the region. These acts of sabotage are indicative of hybrid warfare tactics, where state and non-state actors employ unconventional methods to disrupt and destabilize adversaries. The Baltic Sea, a strategic corridor for energy and data transmission between Europe and Russia, have become a focal point for such covert operations. Historically, the Baltic region has been a hotspot for geopolitical tensions, especially between Russia and NATO member states. The recent uptick in sabotage activities coincides with heightened hostilities following Russia's actions in Ukraine. In response, NATO has bolstered its military presence in the Baltic Sea, initiating the Baltic Sentry mission to safeguard undersea infrastructure. These incidences are not isolated. For instance, the Nord Stream gas pipelines experienced unexplained leaks in 2022, which many Western nations suspected to be acts of sabotage by Russia. Such events underscore the persistent threat posed by covert operations in the region. Western intelligence agencies have identified a specialized Russian espionage unit, the Department of Special Tasks, or the SST, as a key player in these covert operations. Established in 2023, the SST has been linked to various clandestine operations, including sabotage and attempted assassinations, aimed at undermining Western interests. Looking at this from an intelligence perspective, the formation of such units signifies a strategic shift towards more aggressive and covert tactics. These operations serve multiple purposes: testing the resilience of adversaries, creating political and economic instability, and projecting power without engaging in open conflict. The Baltic Sea has become a theater for modern shadow warfare, where sabotage and covert operations threaten the stability of critical infrastructure. The involvement of specialized units like Russia's SST highlights the sophisticated nature of these threats. As these incidents continue, it's imperative for nations to enhance their own intelligence capabilities, strengthen international collaborations, and develop robust countermeasures to protect vital assets. We head to Iran for our next story, where we're delving into a concerning development: the detention of British nationals Craig and Lindsay Foreman by the Iranian government on charges of espionage. Craig and Lindsay Foreman, a British couple in their early 50s, embarked on a global motorcycle journey aimed at promoting positive psychology. Their adventure took an unexpected turn when they were detained by Iranian authorities last month. The Iranian judiciary alleges that the Foremans were collecting information in various locations under the guise of tourism and research, accusing them of collaborating with intelligence agencies from hostile nations. This incident highlights the complexities and risks associated with international travel in regions with heightened security concerns. Iran's history of detaining foreign nationals on espionage charges often serves as a geopolitical tool, potentially leveraging detainees in broader diplomatic negotiations. The Foremans entered Iran from Armenia on December 30, 2024, as part of their journey to Australia. Their last social media update was on January 3rd from Isfahan. The UK's Foreign Office has expressed deep concern over the detention and is providing consular assistance. Unfortunately, this is not an isolated case. Iran has a documented pattern of detaining foreign nationals, often on charges of espionage. Notably, British-Iranian nationals such as Nazarine Zaghari Ratcliffe have faced similar accusations, leading to prolonged imprisonments. These detentions frequently coincide with periods of escalated tensions between Iran and Western nations, suggesting a strategic move behind the actions. Richard Ratcliffe, husband of Nazarine Zaghari Ratcliffe, has urged UK officials to act swiftly in response to the Foreman's detention. He emphasized the necessity for prompt government intervention to prevent prolonged incarceration and to address what he describes as Iran's practice of state hostage-taking. From my perspective as a retired intelligence officer, the Foreman's case underscores the importance of understanding the geopolitical landscapes before traveling. Individuals, especially those from nations with strained relations with Iran, should exercise heightened caution and remain informed about the potential risk of detention on ambiguous charges. Some areas of the world are just not worth the risk of arbitrary detention and arrest if political tensions are already known. The detention of Craig and Lindsay Foreman serves as a reminder of the intricate interplay between individual actions and international politics. During my career as an intelligence officer, I was well aware that any country I traveled to could result in my detention as a political hostage, and I made sure to do whatever I needed to minimize that risk. As Iran continues to utilize espionage charges as a diplomatic instrument, foreign nationals must remain vigilant. The global community, in turn, should advocate for transparent legal processes and the protection of human rights. In the next story, we're examining a significant development: the CIA's increased use of drone surveillance on Mexican drug cartels. The CIA has escalated its deployment of the MQ-9 Reaper drones to monitor activities of drug cartels within Mexico. These operations, extending beyond borders areas in the Mexican interior, aim to gather actionable intelligence on cartel movements and operations. The information collected is shared with Mexican authorities to bolster their efforts against organized crime. From an intelligence standpoint, this initiative underscores the U.S. commitment to addressing the cross-border drug trafficking crisis. However, such unilateral actions raise questions about sovereignty and the potential diplomatic repercussions of conducting surveillance missions within another nation's territory without explicit consent. This enhanced surveillance program began during President Joe Biden's administration and has intensified under President Trump, who has designated Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. This designation grants the U.S. broader authority to combat these groups, including expanded surveillance and potential military interventions. The relationship between the U.S. and Mexico is currently strained, with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum downplaying reports of U.S. drone operations as part of a political campaign. This reaction highlights the delicate balance between collaborative security efforts and national sovereignty concerns. Security analysts suggest that while the intelligence gathered from these drone missions is invaluable for disrupting cartel operations, the lack of transparency and coordination with Mexican authorities could exacerbate tensions. This is a fine line between effective counter-narcotic strategies and respecting the sovereignty of neighboring nations. From my professional perspective, while the tactical advantages of such surveillance are clear, it's imperative to consider the broader geopolitical implications. Collaborative efforts, with mutual consent and clear communication, are essential to maintain trust and effectiveness in combating transnational threats. The CIA's increased drone surveillance over Mexican drug cartels represents a proactive approach to a persistent security challenge. However, balancing operational effectiveness with respect for international partnerships and sovereignty remains crucial. As these operations continue, the emphasis should be on fostering cooperation and transparency to achieve shared security objectives. Head to Australia for our next story, focusing on troubling revelation from ASIO. According to a recent report by the Associated Press, the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation has uncovered plots by 3 foreign governments aiming to harm individuals on Australian soil. ASIO's Director General Mike Burgess disclosed that these plots included attempts to lure a human rights advocate to a third country for assassination. Other schemes targeted critics both within and outside Australia. This represents a significant escalation in foreign interference tactics, moving beyond espionage to direct threats against individuals. From an intelligence perspective, this highlights the evolving nature of global espionage and interference. Foreign actors are no longer just gathering intelligence, they're willing to engage in physical harm to silence dissent. This shift necessitates a stronger response from national security agencies to protect citizens and maintain sovereignty. Australia has been on high alert against foreign interference, particularly given its strategic alliances and defense initiatives. The AUKUS partnership, involving the U.S. and the UK, has further raised Australia's profile, making it a prime target for espionage. Foreign actors have shown increased interest in Australia's planned nuclear submarine fleet and other security technologies tied to AUKUS. This situation mirrors global trends where nations use aggressive tactics to suppress critics abroad. These actions violate international norms and pose direct threats to the safety and freedoms of individuals in democratic societies. In his annual threat assessment, Mike Burgess emphasized the severity of the situation, warning that the security environment in Australia is expected to deteriorate over the next 5 years. He noted that these threats come from both adversarial and, surprisingly, friendly nations. This challenges traditional assumptions about alliances and demands a reevaluation of security policies. Intelligence professionals recognize that these lines between friend and foe are becoming increasingly blurred. Nations must remain cautious, ensuring that diplomatic relations do not compromise national security. Australia's exposure to these foreign plots underscores the complex challenges nations face in protecting their citizens. As espionage tactics evolve, so must the strategies to counter them. Vigilance, adaptability, and international cooperation are critical in addressing these threats. Looking ahead, it's likely that foreign interference efforts will become more sophisticated, particularly with an advancement of technology. Intelligence sharing and proactive defense measures will be essential in mitigating these risks. In our next story, we delve into Russia's growing footprint in Africa's Sahel region. Recent reports highlight Moscow's strategic maneuvers to bolster its presence in this volatile and resource-rich area. Russia has been steadily increasing its influence in the Sahel, a region plagued by political instability and security challenges. By forging military alliances and providing support to local governments, Moscow aims to fill the void left by retreating Western forces, particularly France and the United States. This strategy not only extends Russia's geopolitical reach, but also secures access to valuable resources and strategic military positions. From an intelligence perspective, this development signifies a shift in the global power dynamics. Russia's engagement in the Sahel involves deploying private military companies, such as Africa Corps, to offer security assistance and training to local forces. This approach enables Russia to project power while maintaining plausible deniability, complicating the response strategies of Western nations. Historically, the Sahel has been a battleground for influence among global powers. France maintained a dominant presence until recent years when anti-French sentiment and political upheavals led to the withdrawal of its troops. This exodus creates a power vacuum that Russia has been quick to exploit. In countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, military juntas have welcomed Russian support, viewing it as an alternative to Western intervention. This realignment has not only altered the regional security landscape, but has also raised concerns about long-term implications of Russia's involvement. Analysts observe that Russia's strategy in the Sahel is multifaceted, combining military assistance with information campaigns to sway public opinion. By positioning itself as a reliable partner against insurgencies, Russia gains favor among local populations and governments. However, this partnership comes at the cost of increased human rights abuses and prolonged conflicts, as seen in other regions where Russian mercenaries operate. Russia's expanding influence in Africa's Sahel region represents a significant shift in the geopolitical landscape. As Western powers reassess their roles, Russia's proactive engagement fills the void, bringing both opportunities and challenges to the region. Moving forward, it's crucial to monitor how this influence shapes the Sahel's security dynamics and the broader implications for global relations. In the next story, we delve into a critical cybersecurity issue. The Chinese state-sponsored hacking group known as Salt Typhoon has been deploying a custom malware tool called Jumbled Path to infiltrate U.S. telecommunication networks. This sophisticated cyber espionage campaign has significant implications for national security and the integrity of our communications infrastructures. This analysis is based on recent reports, including the article from the Bleeping Computer entitled "Chinese Hackers Use Custom Malware to Spy on U.S. Telecom Networks." Salt Typhoon, also known as Earth Estries and Ghost Emperor, has been active since at least 2019, primarily targeting government entities and telecommunication companies. Their recent activities involved the deployment of Jumbled Path, a custom utility designed to stealthily monitor network traffic and potentially capture sensitive data within telecommunication provider systems. The group's modus operandi includes infiltrating core network infrastructure, often through stolen credentials. Once inside, they deploy Jumbled Path to maintain persistent access and monitor communication without detection. This level of infiltration not only compromises the privacy of individual communications, but also poses a significant threat to national security by potentially exposing sensitive governmental and military information. From an intelligence perspective, the use of custom malware like Jumbled Path indicates a high level of sophistication and resources, suggesting state sponsorship. The ability to remain undetected within critical infrastructure for extended periods underscores the necessity for robust cybersecurity measures and continuous monitoring to protect against such advanced persistent threats. The telecommunications sector has long been a prime target for cyber espionage due to the vast amounts of data and sensitive information transmitted through its networks. The activities of Salt Typhoon are part of a broader pattern of state-sponsored cyber attacks aimed at gathering intelligence and compromising national security. In response to these threats, U.S. authorities has been urging telecommunication companies to bolster their cybersecurity defenses. The Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, has proposed new rules requiring telecom companies to secure their networks against unauthorized access and cyber threats, emphasizing the urgency of protecting critical infrastructures from sophisticated adversaries. Security experts highlight that the deployment of Jumbled Path within U.S. telecom networks represents a significant escalation in cyber espionage tactics. The malware's ability to monitor network traffic covertly allows attackers to capture sensitive data, including potentially classified communications. The recent breaches have prompted legislative action, with U.S. Senator Ron Wyden proposing a bill aimed at securing the networks of American telecommunication companies. This legislative push reflects the growing recognition of the need for stringent cybersecurity measures to protect against state-sponsored threats. The infiltration of U.S. telecommunication networks by China's Salt Typhoon group, utilizing Jumbled Path malware, underscores the evolving and sophisticated nature of cyber threats facing critical infrastructure. This incident serves as yet another reminder of the importance of proactive cybersecurity measures, legislative support, and international cooperation to defend against such adversaries. As we continue to monitor these developments, it's imperative for both public and private sectors to collaborate in strengthening our defenses. For our last story, we head to the U.S., where we're examining a significant policy shift by the United States, the designation of several Latin American drug cartels and criminal gangs as global terrorist organizations. This move aims to enhance immigration and enforcement and target transnational criminal activities. Our discussion references recent reports, including an article from Al Jazeera titled "U.S. Declares Drug Cartels, Criminal Gangs, Global Terrorist Organizations." On February 19, 2025, the U.S. government officially designated several Latin American drug cartels and criminal gangs as global terrorist organizations. This list includes Venezuela's Tren de Aragua, Mexico's Sinaloa Cartel, Jalisco New Generation Cartel, and others involved in extensive drug trafficking and violent criminal activities. The designation imposes sanctions such as asset freezing and travel bans, aiming to disrupt the operations of these organizations and curb their influence. From an intelligence perspective, there are some investigatory benefits to the criminal gangs being classified as terrorist organizations. It allows U.S. agencies to employ counterterrorism tools against these cartels, facilitating enhanced surveillance, financial tracking, and legal action. It also broadens the scope for international cooperation in combating these entities, as countries often have established frameworks for addressing terrorism and can now be applied to these cartels. However, this move raises concerns about potential diplomatic tensions, particularly with Mexico. The Mexican government has historically opposed such designations, viewing them as infringements on its sovereignty and expressing fears that it could lead to unilateral military actions by the U.S. on Mexican soil. Balancing the objectives of national security with the needs of diplomatic collaboration remains a complex challenge in this context. The decision to label these cartels as terrorist organizations is part of a broader strategy to combat the escalating drug crisis in the United States, especially the surge in fentanyl-related overdoses. Previous administrations have considered similar measures but refrained due to potential diplomatic fallout and the complexities of implementing such designations. The current administration's approach reflects a more aggressive stance on addressing transnational crime and its impact on U.S. national security. Historically, U.S. Mexico relations have been sensitive to issues of sovereignty and intervention. The Mexican government, under President Claudia Sheinbaum, has emphasized the importance of mutual respect and cooperation in addressing shared security challenges. This designation could test the resilience of bilateral relations and necessitate careful diplomatic navigation to maintain collaborative efforts against organized crime. Security analysts suggest that while these designations provide U.S. agencies with expanded legal authorities to combat these cartels, its effectiveness will depend on implementation and international cooperation. There is a risk that unilateral actions could strain relationships with key partners, potentially hindering collaborative efforts essential for addressing the transnational nature of these criminal organizations. Mexican officials have expressed concern that this move could lead to an increased militarization of the drug war and potential violations of national sovereignty. They advocate for a focus on addressing the root causes of drug trafficking and violence through socioeconomic development and public health initiatives, rather than solely relying on punitive measures. The U.S. designation of Latin American drug cartels as global terrorist organization marks a significant escalation in the efforts to combat transnational crime. While it equips U.S. agencies with enhanced tools to disrupt these groups, it also presents challenges in terms of diplomatic relations and the potential for unintended consequences. As this policy unfolds, it will be crucial to monitor its impact on both diplomatic security and international partnerships. Well, that's all for this week. As always, the links to the stories discussed are in the transcript. I want to remind my audience that I will be providing an online course at the University of Ottawa on the psychology behind human sources and intelligence collection. Class sizes are limited, so if you're interested, I recommend that you register as soon as possible. I'll leave a link in the show notes. Until next week, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.
That's a wrap for this week's Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. From shifting U.S. intelligence priorities and the encryption battle between the U.S. and the U.K. to Russian sabotage in Europe and foreign plots uncovered by ASIO, today's stories highlight the ever-evolving and high-stakes world of intelligence. Bringing you these in-depth analyses takes time, experience, and a dedication to uncovering the intelligence stories that matter most. Each episode is the result of extensive research, careful analysis, and years of expertise in the field. If you found today's insights valuable, consider liking, sharing, or leaving a comment. It helps expand the conversation and grow the podcast's reach. And if you'd like to support the show and help keep these intelligence briefings coming, you can do so through Patreon or Buzzsprout. The links are in the show notes. Whether it's an ongoing contribution or a one-time donation, every bit helps ensure we can continue delivering expert analysis on the security issues shaping our world. You'll find the links in the show notes. Thank you for listening. And as Neil always says, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe. See you next week.